This episode had everything. Mysteries deepening, uncomfortable dinner conversations, workplace drama as per usual, and of course a paperclip existential crisis. I have to say, and I'm pretty sure everybody will agree with me on this one, that the dynamic of this season is just perfect. Everything is moving at a faster pace. We're getting some answers finally, but naturally, even more questions pile up. Just when I think I have a solid theory, the show throws in another curveball and I'm back at square one. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Your Audi is going to be...
The episode opens up with Mark recounting his encounter with Miss Casey Gemma to Ragabi, saying it felt unnatural and detached. Ragabi tells him she is essential. Mark realizes that while others bargain with grief, his situation might allow him to bring someone back. On the severed floor, Dylan describes Irving's sketch of the exports hall with instructions on the back and how to get there to Mark and Helly. They conclude, Helly concludes, that is where Miss Casey is being kept. Dylan reveals that he left the sketch behind a poster in the break room, but refuses to get it back. Now, he doesn't say this, but we can understand that he fears it could affect his visitation rights with his Audi's wife. Helly volunteers, but Mark remains hesitant. Meanwhile, Milchick sits in his office after a negative performance review. Miss Huang enters and he reminds her that she cannot graduate from the Wintertide Fellowship until he deems her ready, instructing her to grow up. In the bathroom, Helly and Mark discuss Milchick's intimidation tactics. Mark reveals that him and Helena shared vessels. Helly is clearly upset about this, but assumes it was another Lumon tactic. She later leads Mark to an unused office where they share vessels under a covered desk. Meanwhile, Dylan meets with his Audi's wife Gretchen again in the Audi family visitation suite. Their connection deepens and she sees in him what she no longer sees in her husband. They eventually embrace and that leads to a kiss. Milchick continues working alone, hyper-focused on paper clipping stacks of documents. He replays his performance review criticism about using overly complex words, then looks into a mirror and repeats self-corrective phrases, gradually simplifying them into a demand to grow up. After sharing vessels, and I know I'm using this phrase a lot, but I just really like it, Mark and Helly walk down the hall back to what I can assume MDR. Helly asks if his experience with her was different from Helena. Mark responds with a kiss. His nose begins to bleed and they go to Miss Huang for assistance. While being questioned, Mark phases back to his Audi self under Ragabi's care. She interprets this as progress and pushes for an accelerated reintegration, proposing to flood the Severance chip through the hole in his head. Mark refuses and leaves. That night, Dylan's wife Gretchen lies to Dylan's Audi, saying the visitation was cancelled. The same night, Irving arrives for dinner at Bert's house and meets Bert's husband Fields. The atmosphere is tense. Bert, once warm and affectionate as an innie, now carries an unsettling presence. Their conversation takes a strange turn when Bert reveals that he severed for religious reasons, believing his innie had a separate soul that could go to heaven even if his Audi was condemned. Then, as the conversation continues, Fields casually mentions that Bert has been with Lumon for 20 years. Irving, caught off guard, points out that the Severance was only introduced 12 years ago. Bert, clearly uncomfortable, brushes it off as a drunken mistake and quickly shifts gears. Sensing the tension, Fields redirects the conversation with a pointed question. Did Bert and Irving's innies ever share vessels in an unprotected way? He follows up by saying he believes innies deserve to experience love and that he hopes their relationship was meaningful. Meanwhile, Drummond breaks into Irving's apartment and locates his list of severed employees, specifically focusing on Bert's name and address. Now Mark eats alone at a Chinese restaurant when Helena arrives and sits in front of him. She initiates a conversation stating she has heard good things about his work. Mark responds that he has heard nothing about his own work. She flirts and invites him to meet her father, saying he would be the first. She misnames Gemma as Hannah and Mark becomes extremely suspicious. He excuses himself and leaves. Back at Ragabi's lab, aka Mark's basement, Mark agrees to the reintegration regeneration procedure immediately. She injects fluid into his severance chip, and just like that, his memories rapidly shift between past moments with both Gemma and Helly. Now, moments after this procedure, Devon arrives. Mark collapses, seizing and foaming at the mouth. Meanwhile, Irving and Bert part ways after the dinner. Bert dismisses Field's mistake about the timeline, but remains visibly affected. Now, let's talk theories and questions. Now, one of the biggest questions this episode raises is about consent and morality within the Severance system, or the severed floor, or within Lumon's walls, I guess. Well, at least for me. And I have to ask, and would love to hear your guys' opinion on this. Now, in the previous episode, I established for myself that I believe what Helena did to Mark is SA. Then what do we make of what Gretchen did to Dylan? Now, she didn't do anything, but she kissed Dylan's innie, knowing he isn't the same person as her husband. Now, my question here to all of you, and I would love to know your opinion on this, does that count as cheating? This whole situation is pretty murky, but Gretchen's decision to lie to Outie Dylan about the visitation being canceled feels like guilt. She clearly doesn't want him to know what happened, which makes me wonder if she sees it as crossing a line. Moving on, Bert is extremely sus, and that is obvious. I don't believe for a second that his dinner invitation was all that innocent. It feels like he specifically invited Irving out to get him out of his house so Drummond could snoop around. It wouldn't be surprising if Bert, who seems to have deeper ties to Lumon than we originally thought, is working with them. And let's not forget Field's slip-up.
It was 20.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes, because I remember we're having drinks with your Lumon partner.
That's not a small mistake. Bert plays it off as a drunken error, but it suggests Lumon's history and Bert's involvement in it is much deeper than we were led to believe. Then there's Helena's bizarre mistake
Hannah.
calling Gemma Hannah. Now, Helena, her words, not mine, is supposed to be the head of Lumon. She would absolutely know who Gemma is, so why say the wrong name? Was she testing Mark to see if he would correct her because they might be erasing Gemma from Mark's memory, or was she dropping a hint? Or this could have actually been an actual mistake. We know that Gemma is on the testing floor, and I suspect Peg Kincaid is also there too, because their alleged deaths have been way too similar. Now hear me out. What if Hannah is another person trapped there? What if Helena made a mistake, a slip up? What if she mistakenly called Gemma as Hannah? And what if there is a Hannah there completely unrelated to Gemma, but who passed away in the same way as Gemma and Peg Kincaid? And if that's the case, it raises some questions for me. Is there a whole group of people being kept on the testing floor all under similar circumstances? How many dead people have actually been repurposed by Lumon? And finally, this would be my question to you guys, did Helena genuinely slip up, or was she deliberately pushing Mark towards something? Hello, my friends. Hi, it has been a minute. Now, the reason I decided to record it like this is because I'm just lazy and I'm currently editing the video, but I thought of something, and I'm kind of surprised I didn't think about this a little bit sooner. But what if Helena actually just really likes Mark? Because from everything that has been said, it feels like Mark is her first in everything. Kiss, sharing vessels, maybe hypothetically boyfriend. And in the previous episode, we see how Helena is looking after Mark as he's leaving the office, right? And then now she just magically reappears at the same restaurant that he is in, sits across him, and, you know, maybe she's just like going through that kind of love phase where it feels like a little bit stalkery-ish. But I mean, to each their own, I guess. And with the Hannah comment, it could have just been the fact that she was testing the waters and seeing how Mark would react to a comment about Gemma. Could be, I don't know. Please let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Maybe this is also wrong. Now, something interesting I have noticed, and I might be reaching here, but hear me out, please. In this episode, we see a lot of focus on the Severance chip, and you know what it reminded me of? Bees. Now, let's go back to the UUR. In Chapter 2, Pollination, our self-proclaimed genius Rickon writes,
I delighted in how they darted hither and thither, thoroughly convinced of the dire importance of their work. How like human beings they are, I thought. It was only upon later reflection that I realized this observation was not merely hilarious, but devastatingly profound.
He goes on to describe,
on the surface, it would seem we have less in common with the noble bee than with even the great ape of yore. However, no. Bees, for those unschooled in entomology, are broken into 3 subsets. Workers, who build the hive, prepare the honey, and clean each other. Queens, who eat the honey and live in opulence. And wasps, who fight wars at the queen's behest and defend the hive from bears. If this sounds vaguely familiar, it should. It is nearly identical to the social structure that we as humans employ.
Now, if this doesn't sound like Lumon's entire operational structure, then I don't know what does. It's not just a metaphor, it is something that is listed in the security room when Dylan goes to activate Helena, Mark, and Irving. If Lumon has a command called Beehive, what does it do? Could it be a total control mechanism? Something that can be activated at any time to force the innies into complete mindless compliance? What if Lumon doesn't just control memory, but behavior in real time? This isn't just theoretical. There's literally visual evidence backed in the show. The Be Ever Merry poster in Lumon's office is one of the clearest examples. It shows Kier's face on a bee's body surrounded by honeycomb-like hexagons, reinforcing the idea that the workers, aka the innies, are trapped in a hive, endlessly serving their queen, aka the Eagans, or Lumon. Now, after thinking about this, I was like, I can't be the only one. There's gotta be more people who saw this and saw this earlier than I did. So bless the internet, I went on it. Of course I went on Reddit. And shout out to Tootie Boots Stinkweed, who pointed out something mind-blowing. Bees only see UV light, which includes blue, green, and a color called bee purple. Do you know what Lumon's entire office color scheme is on the severed floor? Blue and green. Now, another interesting thing is Mark W. from Season 2, Episode 1 insists that the keyboards were puce, while Gwendolyn argues that they were purple.
Ours was a creme brulee and the keyboards were puce.
They were purple.
No, they were puce. I know because it makes me nauseous. And I hate sweets.
Now, the fact that Mark and Gwen remember the same keyboards in completely different colors suggests something is off. What if Lumon can tweak their perceptions in real time, making them see what Lumon wants them to see? If that's the case, then they're not just controlling memories, they're controlling reality itself. Now, if the severed floor is designed to be perceived like a beehive, this means innies are literally seeing a world that is artificially limited, keeping them focused on their tasks and ensuring they never perceive the full picture. Then there's Milchik. His motorcycle helmet, as Tootie Boots Stinkweed pointed out, resembles a bee's head. When he sets it down on the table, the reflections create 3 small dots, identical to the ocelli, the simple light detecting eyes found on a bee's forehead. Knowing Severance, this can't just be a coinkydink. Milchik is essentially a wasp navigating between the innie and outie worlds, ensuring the hive functions as it should. But here's where things get even deeper, and once again, thank you to this Reddit user for pointing this out. Now, in the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, Orpheus travels to the underworld to retrieve his lost wife but loses her forever when he looks back. Mark, trying to recover Gemma, is the exact same setup, but the bee connection here, Orpheus's brother Aristeus, is directly linked to bees, and after Orpheus dies, bees literally swarm from his body. Memory, loss, rebirth, and serving a higher system are all key themes in Severance, and this mythology only strengthens this theory. So what does this all mean? Lumon has structured itself like a beehive, with severed workers at the bottom, the Eagans at the top, and enforcers like Milchik keeping everyone in line. The beehive command could be an actual override function, forcing total obedience. Now, the show's color scheme, while it's amazing and great, might reinforce the idea that innies exist in a world tailored to limit their perception. Now, the Greek mythology aspect reinforces the idea that Mark's journey is about retrieving someone from a system designed to erase them. And finally, the biggest questions I have here. If Lumon's hive is thriving, what happens when the worker bees realize their own power? And what happens when the hive collapses? Now, I know this theory might be a reach, but you can't ignore the overwhelming amount of bee symbolism in Severance. And that is it for this week. Please, please, please let me know your thoughts down below. Also, please remember these are all just theories and questions. Never said it was facts. I want to thank everybody for watching this video, and if you enjoy this type of content, please be sure to subscribe. Praise Kier. Until next time.